Welcome back, my gorgeous underlings. So today I'm going through the proposal. Now, the proposal, for those of you who do not know, as part of research project, is the first. It's usually the first 2 to 3 pages of your folio. So you remember the folio being usually your very first assignment piece, and it's also a total of 10 pages long. So this generally takes up to the first 3 pages. Um, so in this, there are a couple of different sections. And for those in my class, you'll notice that I've got here, you should have already written a few things because we actually started writing some of these last term, but I'll go through and show you some of that stuff anyway in this video, just in case anyone missed it. Or if you're joining me from another school and you're just needing support, it doesn't matter. So we're going to go through each of these. In this particular PowerPoint, there is SACE exemplars, so I will not spend a lot of time on them, um, but I'll, I'll just go through the PowerPoint. I'll show you the exemplars. I've also got PDF exemplars for you to have a look at, which were just taken directly out of the SACE exemplars from the website. Okay, so there are 6 different areas that you need to focus on. There's the background, consideration, refinement of a research question, the research processes, the capabilities, safety and ethical considerations, plus the planning of your research processes. Okay, so they're our 6 topics. Subheadings, I suppose, for this section. Okay, first off is your background. Now, this is so everything in this should be a couple of paragraphs, absolute maximum. So you do not need to be writing essays for each section. So, and you'll, as I said, when you see the exemplars, that'll make more sense. So, what is your topic and your question? Um, why have you selected this? What does it mean to you? Is there anything you're planning to do with the information you've learnt? So, for example, I know there are a few people who are looking at things because they're interested in developing it as a pathway, and some people it just generally interests them as a hobby, whatever it is. Um, or it might be something that you're just really, really good at. It doesn't matter. Um, so again, you're writing a couple of sentences, um, but it's important. Once again, it needs to be coherent. It needs to make sense. So start with I did this, then I did this, and then I came to this conclusion. Okay, we don't want the jumping back and forth and the mixing of ideas. If you want to discuss, if it helps, you can use dot points. That's not a huge issue when you're starting to talk about all the different topics that you were looking at originally, because some people had many. So be mindful not to putting that all in one sentence can look a bit overwhelming and not necessarily make a lot of sense. So you can use dot points. Don't feel too worried about that. All right. So this is an excerpt from a SACE exemplar. This is I chose this topic directly because it directly affects me, as I said. And then they talk about what their question is. Um, they want to talk about what they want to do with the information and what they're hoping, and then what they're hoping to achieve from their research question. Okay, so this is really cool, a really cool exemplar. This exemplar, I believe, most of the exemplars that I've taken, like the copied and pasted from or taken little excerpts from, usually the B plus, B plus A bands. Um, I I think there might be 1 or 2 C's in there along the way as well. But just as a way to phrase things, these can be really helpful. This is the second one. This is talking about skateboarding, and they talked about why they like skateboarding, and they talked about the fun, the skill, and all the different things that go into it. And then he starts actually talking about the filming side of it, in particularly the editing. Okay, so again, just a bit of background. That's all it is. Background about why you chose the topic, how it applies to you. Pretty simple. Again, another exemplar. Okay, so, consideration refinement of a research question. Now, this is one of the main ones that gets marked. Okay, so you need to when we go to write this consideration of a refinement of a question, It is one that we do ask you to pay particular attention to. So you're talking about what you were originally thinking and how did you end up on the question you decided on. So if you watched my last video, we talked about how did you go from a really broad topic down to a very narrow question. You need to explain your decision process and explain your thought process around all that. You can talk about all the different things that you were going to work on, but then why did you choose it? What is it? What is the really good thing about this one? Why is this one useful? Why is it useful to you or useful to someone you know? When we talk about scope and purpose of the research, you're talking about um, like guiding questions. So, did you go, okay, so this is my overall big question, but I've developed two or three or four guiding questions that are going to help me make my topic way more manageable for me to handle because there is a lot of information and I don't, I, you don't want to get overwhelmed and drowning in info. Okay. Now, I'm not going to read through the SACE exemplars. This particular exemplar came straight out of an A plus exemplar. Um, they had a lot to say. I will let you read that in your own accord. You can pause the video or you can download the PowerPoint yourself from the Google Drive docs. Link will be in the bottom of the video. Okay, again, another one. So they talked about their interest and their refinement. They put their mind map there. All the highlighting and all that kind of information in this one is actually, and the writing is from the SACE board. That's not from me. So just showing where they were making a particular good point. Sorry, I've got another one. Another example. So here, this is where they use some dot points. So they use skate videographer interviews, skateboard. So they looked at analyzing some films, the magazines. They looked at websites, skateboard videos, and then this person actually uses a research process chart, which I did actually copy as a template, if you wish, which is found in the templates folder in the proposal folder on Google Drive. You do not have to use it. It is totally optional. Remember, everything, the way you produce everything, um, is optional on how you wish to present it. So the templates are just there for those who would rather just to be able to get going. They talked about knowing what they wanted to do. They gave a time frame, and again they talked about why it would be an input something for them to do. Now, your research processes. So this is your methods, the methods you chose to complete your research. So this is interviews, surveys, internet research, journal articles, action research, any personal reflections and journal entries. Um, the whole point is that you should be using a combination of primary and secondary sources. So obviously primary sources would be the interviews or the surveys that you conducted. Maybe you, or even like some action research or whatever it is. So it is ideal, especially if you're wanting those higher grade bands, that you are conducting some primary resources. And I will give, there is a list that I will give of what primary and secondary sources are. Um, so for those of you who need reminding, and that will be coming up in the video about the folio. Okay, so if you're looking at the folio, that's where I start talking about that in a lot more greater detail. This is just an exemplar. Again, this is from the dyslexia example. They included interviews with people who work closely with people who are affected by dyslexia. They discover, so they talked about contacts, they talked about doctors and psychologists and teachers. So what I would really like to point out about the way this person has written it is they've said what they're doing, but then they've said why or who. Okay, so it's really important that you're not just saying, I'm going to do some internet research and I'm going to look at some YouTube videos. Be specific, give details. It will help, trust me. This one's a bit harder to read, but so this person actually broke it down into a bit of a timeline. So they said that during these particular weeks during term one, they're going to conduct interviews, they're going to do some internet research during this period, and then they're going to do some action research during this period. This particular person, so this is, for those of you interested, this one is the, what's it called? It's an exemplar. This is an A+ exemplar. So this person went on to get an A+ for their overall folio. And when I was talking before about the having the template, this is the template that the gentleman used. So this is the one that I've gone on to make a template from. So research processes. So these are some of the things he did. Then he's gone and talked about why those processes are valid, why they're reliable, why it's manageable, and why it's ethical in terms of the way he's approached things. Okay, so that template is again, it's a blank template again by the Google Docs, or for those in my class, I'll chuck it up on day. It's up on Daymap as well. Now, the capabilities. So the capabilities is a pretty big one. So the capabilities, again, you're talking about linking in to the capabilities written by the SACE board. So there are 7 in total, and I'll show you a worksheet that we worked on, that I worked on with my students. Again, if you're not in my class, you can access that worksheet either from the SACE website or from the Google Drive. This person picked 3 different capabilities. And what the really important thing is what you're doing is you're talking to the capability and how you are going to enhance that capability. How are you going to actually work on that? So this person, their literacy, because English is their second language, they're looking at communicating clearly. They're talking about communicating with different people. And then they actually go on to say who those different people are. When they're talking about critical and creative thinking, they're talking about, so they were specifically looking at creative play-based activities for students because they were focusing on fine motor skills. And then they took, and finally they also turned around and talked about the personal and social understanding. Now I'll just quickly show you the capabilities worksheet. So this is the one that I put to, I've edited ever so slightly. So this is the one, it is originally from the SACE website. I've just added a few bits and pieces to it. So my expectation is that you should select 2, then you select 3 dot points from each of the capabilities, and then you need to explain how you're going to be developing it throughout your research project. Okay, you can present this in the table format, which I'll show you below, or you can rewrite it in the form of a paragraph. It is totally optional. Now, this is an example provided. So this is so a student has picked the personal and social capability. These are the dot points that you develop during your research project, or can develop during your research project. So they've picked participating actively and responsibly in learning, developing empathy and understanding for others, making responsible decisions based on evidence. And then if you look here, they've copied and pasted those here. And then here, in dot point form, and not in any lengthy way, they've talked about how they are going to develop it. So I plan to be actively involved in the community and decisions making, approaching the council with a design and work plan. They're talking about, if you're looking at actively and responsibly in learning and working in community life. So here they're talking about being responsible and approaching the council to put together a mural. That they've also done a work plan and a design. So they're going in, they're communicating with a large range of people, and they're going to hopefully get approval for this mural that they're going to make. They're talking about, and then they go on to talk about how they have a a strong belief of the role of art within public spaces. Um, Developing of understanding. So this is respect to diversity. So you need to respect diversity and difference. You need to be open to different perspectives. Um, and then making responsible decisions. I want to know the themes and produced important to my design mural and the decisions that are made about it. Um, you need to, so tradition for many murals is that they reflect the identity of the local community. And then they go on to talk about how the local, who is the local community, what themes would they suggest. Okay? So you've got the literacy capability, which every single person, no matter what you're doing, no matter what your topic, the literacy capability is just there. Numeracy, you've got information, so ICT, critical and creative thinking, personal and social capability, ethical understanding and capability, and intercultural understanding. Okay, so use this, you need to use this. Again, I'll highlight, you're going to pick 2 capabilities, highlight 3, I wouldn't do more than 4, 3 areas that you wish to develop, and then you're saying how is it relevant and how are you going to expand and develop that capability throughout your research project. And you can either just copy and paste it in this format into your document, or you can rewrite it as a paragraph, which you have already seen in the exemplars. Okay, so that's the student worksheet. The safety and ethical considerations. Now, safety and ethical considerations is you taking into account what you need to do to be respectful and safe during your research project, especially if some of you are focusing on some of those more delicate topics which may upset people. Okay, so this is probably the better list of the 2. So ethical principles for research include. So some of the big ones are being non-discriminative. You're looking at confidentiality, intellectual property, being open and honest. So you really need to be when you're planning this little paragraph. You need to talk about this comes into play the way you're planning on doing so your research methods, so your research approaches, and how are you planning to do that responsibly, safely, and ethically. Okay, and again, here is some questions. Now, this one's a really interesting one because they actually went to work with children. There was actually some legal stuff that they needed to consider, which is really, really important, especially if you're looking at doing any kind of observational research. You just need to be super mindful about your own safety and safety of others. So if you have any concerns or questions around that, please just ask your teacher or send me an email. And then finally, 6, planning and developing of the research. Now, this is just you going, I'm going to do this. So week 1, I'm going to do this. Week 2, I'm going to do this. Week 3, I'm going to do this. Or you can just do dates. Do not, if you're not going to actually, you do not have to use this template, I might point out. You can just go term 2, weeks 4 to 5, 4 to 6, I plan to do this, this, and this. The more, again, being specific and giving detail, this is where it's going to help you. And actually developing that plan gives you a bit more of a timeline, which is really, really useful. And so I know for my class, going into the end of term of this term, we will be having formal conversations with each student about where they're at with their research. And that'll be a conversation that will be taking notes and will be included as part of the planning for the research. So so that it's obvious that you're being checked in on. And then it gets so similar to what this person did. So they're doing the interviews during term one, then internet research term one. They talk about like all the things that they're planning on doing. So it's the planning of the research is showing when you're going to do and what you're planning on doing when. That was really poorly worded. What you're planning on doing and when you're planning on doing it. So almost like a bit of a checklist. Okay. So with that in mind, I have a couple of um, example templates which are open to use. So this is just a Word template. Now under each of these, I've given you some, I suppose, writing prompts. So if a consideration refine a question, what were you thinking originally? How did you refine a question? Were there any limitations? Were there iterations of the same question? So did you go through different wording? Were you playing with different ideas? What were they? If you ended up changing stuff, why did you change it? What was the decision process? What was it that what was the decision and why did it occur? And again, research processes, it's basically stuff I've already said, so I'm not going into too much detail. And you can use this if you want. Again, you don't have to, but I've got date, plan, or actions to be taken. And that is there if you wish to use it. Please make sure your SACE ID always occurs on top of it. Do not put your name on any of this work. It has to be your SACE ID. Okay, so that is that one. If you're not so much a person that likes Word, I have just got a plain black and white so you can make it look as pretty yourself. It's the same wording, just very different. So it's probably a little bit less overwhelming. So consideration, refinement, question. So it's just all these things down here, and you're just writing it in there. Muchness of a muchness, and again, I've put that in there. You don't have to use it. These are options. You do not have to use them if you do not want to. And then for those of you that were interested in that process chart, this is the chart. Okay. Um, again, optional. Don't have to use it. So that I just want one more thing to show you, which is the SACE exemplar. So if you're really struggling and you don't really know what it should look like, I'll just show you the dyslexia one. So the proposal, so you will end up with a cover sheet. You're not going to do that first up. Your proposal, as I said, is that first couple of pages of your folio. So you can see here, they've talked about their topic. They've talked about the refinement of their research question. Then they've talked about their capabilities, and then they've actually talked about how their outcome will actually look. So what their plan for their outcome is going to be. Now, for most of it, so for those in my class at least, they've used their mind map. We used a lotus diagram. Either is good. And then it talked about how am I going to achieve my project. Now this person, rather than doing like what I said, like week one do this, week two do this. This is how they've chosen to present theirs. As I said, there is absolutely zero wrong with that. Now, what this means is they've actually given themselves a lot more narrow scope on how to answer their overall research project question. So if they were writing an essay, this is fantastic because this is essay 1, mini essay 2, essay 3, essay 4, essay 5. And they're only working like a couple of hundred words each. But all of it's effective in answering their research project question. Oh, here you go. And then they go into week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. Okay, so they've broken it down more. Sorry, I didn't see that bit. Okay, so theirs is actually quite lengthy. That actually takes up a lot of their research project folio page count. please remember that your like anything like this, which is the cover sheets, they do not count. Okay, they do not count in your page numbers. So, and again, there's a couple of other exemplars in there if you wish to have a look. Again, they'll be on Daymap. They'll also be up in, so they're also in the folder on the uh, Google Drive for you. Okay, that's it for that one. I look forward to seeing you for the next video. Hope this was helpful. I've managed to actually allow comments down the bottom. So please stay kind, um, stay safe, and be amazing. Thanks.